And then we'll do a quick overview of question papers, just as a reminder. All right, there goes the recording. So as a reminder, the question paper material, everything you need to know is in Canvas. Am I sharing my screen? Yep. So it is right here in the question paper resources area. The most important links are going to be this first one, this second, and this third. So this first one are the instructions and the rubric for the paper. This is basically a link to the video explaining all about question papers. It's been a while now, so if you need a refresher, go and watch that video. I also linked it in our meeting chat right here. And then the last thing is the example question paper. The rest of these resources can help you to write well and improve your writing, especially scientific writing, but they're not necessary. So each of these things could be helpful to you. So paraphrasing research, if you feel like you're not sure how to do that, looking at this document, how to read scientific papers if you wanted a little more in-depth information than I shared with you. Go to that. Again, for our purposes, reading the abstract, the intro, and the discussion, or skimming those are probably sufficient. Ignoring the methods and the results are probably appropriate for your question papers. So let's take a quick look at the question paper instructions document. So that essentially spells out everything that you need to do. One of the main things is find a question that interests you. And then reading these instructions, you need to have at least 2 full pages using Times New Roman or Liberation Serif font at size 12. That's about 600 words minimum. It might be a little more, but about 2 pages. And then make sure you have in-text citations as well as a reference list. So let's look at an example question paper. This is the one I've shared with you. So as I'm discussing the research I found to answer my question about Ritalin, I might make a statement like, Ritalin influences neurotransmitters in the brain, including dopamine and norepinephrine. So the source that I read that from and learned that from was this Gottlieb 2001. So down in the reference list, I have the full APA citation for Gottlieb. Well, I should. This is actually a mistake right there. It's not the full APA citation there. It should look more like this or like this one. But that shows that this information was learned from that resource. And it didn't say that specifically, but maybe I had a whole paragraph about how these neurotransmitters influence dopamine and norepinephrine. So for my purposes, I didn't need that whole paragraph. I just needed the information that it's influencing those neurotransmitters. So I wrote my own sentence, but I learned that from this source. So that's what an in-text citation is for, to show where you learned that information, who originally did that study, who originally found that finding, that kind of thing. If it was a direct quote, I would just have quotation marks around it and then also a page number in the in-text citation to say exactly what page this direct quote came from. But most of your stuff, I'm guessing, is going to be paraphrased, you describing the research and the findings that you found. So as a reminder, to get to research databases, you can go to our Salt Lake Community College library. Oh, I didn't go back to the library. I went to, here's the library main page. You can scroll down to research databases here, and then click on P for psychology, and then click Psych Info 1887 to current. That's going to be most psychology journals in that year range that you can search through. I also recommend you use Google Scholar. So if you're interested in, say, parenting styles, like our parenting style activity will be right now, parenting style. And maybe we're also interested in parenting style and ADHD. So I can search for that. So ADHD, does parenting style matter? That looks really actually perfect. So this is in the Journal of Clinical Pediatrics, which is a peer-reviewed research journal. So this might be more medical focused rather than psychology focused, but that is okay. Again, reading the abstract, this first top part, the introduction, is going to be more like a background on what has been done in the research before, definitions of these things. So some of your questions might be answered by the intros of articles. And then generally, actually, it looks like this is a report. So yeah, this specific one, they didn't do their own study, so you might actually go through this whole paper. Some papers, let's see if I can find one. This is actually doing a study, so they should have a methods and results. Not sure if this is peer reviewed. It is definitely a study. You can see in their summary or their abstract, they actually summarize their methods and results. So for your purposes, as you read any article, I would skip the methods and results. That's where they talk about how they did their study and their statistics. So ignore that, but definitely do read the discussion, because that's when they talk about the results in plain words or plainer words. So reading the abstract, intro, discussion, or skimming those should be able to help answer your question. Another place to search might be some reputable website with psychology information like the American Psychology Association, and then you would write your question paper to answer the question that you had. Again, just 2 pages, double spaced, with 1 page of references. It needs to be at least 3 references. 2 of those are a peer-reviewed journal article, and 1 of those can be also a peer-reviewed journal article, or something like an APA website or a magazine posting that they have on their website, something like that. All right, so any additional questions about question papers? I know that was really, really brief, but hopefully you do remember or have been working on those up to this point. Just wanted to give a quick overview. All right, well, it looks like we've got 5 students here in class right now. So too bad we don't have everybody in class, because then I think we could break up into 2 groups. With this many students, I think we'll just all stick together as 1 group, and I'll kind of just let you talk about it after we show the video. So I'll give a quick rundown of the parenting styles, and just as a reminder, then we're going to watch some clips from TV shows and movies that have parents acting in ways that might be authoritative, authoritarian, uninvolved, or permissive. And then you'll discuss together which one you think it is, and I'll kind of stand back and let you discuss, similar to how we would in a classroom setting, just like your group table, but you're actually the whole class instead of just 1 group table. All right, so let's move from the top right corner of this box. Authoritative parenting is both high in warmth and high in demandingness. So you have structure, there's rules, but a parent will be going back and forth. In early childhood, this might be something like a child asking, why do they have to wear socks, or why do they have to wear pants? That's one that often comes up in our house, actually. And so having a back and forth with the child about, well, pants are so you can be warm and not freeze when there's snow outside. But hey, maybe you can pick your own color pants. Look, you have these many choices. You can pick one of those. So having some kind of back and forth is an example of authoritative parenting, but you still have that rule of, well, you've got to have pants before you go outside. Authoritarian parenting might be a little different, where it still has those high demands. So let's use that pants example still, but very low warmth. So my response would be, from an authoritarian perspective, might be, well, you have to put pants on because I said you've got to put pants on. So something like that. That would be more indicative of authoritarian. There's not really any back and forth. And you would see this into, say, adolescence as well. So for an adolescent, you might be talking as an authoritative parent. So this one up here, an authoritative parent, about like curfews and having discussions about being able to go on a weekend trip with friends or something like that, and having back and forth, versus authoritarian parent wouldn't be having that back and forth with the children. It would be just like my way or the highway kind of thing. Neglectful or uninvolved parents are both low on warmth and low on demandingness. So very few rules. The child can kind of do what they want, but they have very little warmth from the parent. The parent might be completely outside of the house most of the time, like not actually present, or it might be that the parent is present but doesn't seem to care that much. So that's an example of that. Permissive is also low on the control and strictness and demands. They might not mind if you leave the house without pants, for example. Probably not the best example. I think most parents, especially in the snow, would probably have their early child wear something on their legs so they don't freeze. But you might say a permissive parent is trying to be the best friend of their children. So there's a lot of high warmth, but low demandingness and structure set up there. So hopefully that gives you a quick rundown of those. It reminds you about all of these different parenting styles. Now let's watch a couple little video clips, and then after each one, we'll stop and you can talk about together which kind of parenting style you think it was and why you think it was that parenting style. So we'll watch 3 total. and we'll stop after each one so we can talk so that you students can talk and decide. And then after you've all come to a decision or things like that. Yeah. All right, let's do these videos.
Will, I'm glad you're here. Some business came up I got to handle. So we're going to have to put our trip on hold. You understand?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Just for a couple of weeks.
I understand.
Yeah, maybe a little longer.
Yeah, whatever.
Look, I'll call you next week and we'll iron out the details. Okay?
Yeah.
It was great seeing you, son.
You too, Lou.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Will.
You know what? Actually, this works out better for me. You know, the Slimmies of summer come to class wearing next to nothing. You know what I'm
Will,
saying?
it's all right to be angry.
Hey, why should I be mad? I'm saying at least he said goodbye this time. I just wish I hadn't wasted my money buying this stupid present.
I'm sorry. If there was something that I
Hey,
could
you know
do-
what? You ain't got to do nothing, Uncle Phil. Hey, ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm gonna be sitting up every night asking my mom, when's daddy coming home, you know? Who needs him? Hey, he wasn't there to teach me how to shoot my first basket, but I learned, didn't I? Hey, I got pretty damn good at it too, didn't I,
Yeah,
Uncle Phil?
you did.
Got through my first date without him, right? I learned how to drive. I learned how to shave. I learned how to fight without him. I had 14 great birthdays without him. He never even sent me a damn card. Down with him! I ain't need him then, and I don't need him now.
Will.
Nah, you know what, Uncle Phil? I'm gonna get through college without him. I'm gonna get a great job without him. I'm gonna marry me a beautiful honey, and I'm gonna have me a whole bunch of kids. I'm gonna be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as hell don't need him for that, because ain't a damn thing he could ever teach me about how to love my kids. How come he don't want me, man?
All right, so what kind of parenting styles did you think you saw there? We saw two parents, actually. So Will's biological father. So this is from the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So we saw Will's biological father there, and also Uncle, did I say Phil's biological father? Anyway, we saw the biological father and then Uncle Phil, which was kind of the father figure throughout the show. So you might know things from other aspects of the show as well that you could discuss in these instances too, but you can also just use the evidence presented there. So chat box, use your mics. I'll kind of just be out of your way for a couple minutes while you talk about it. So what about Uncle Phil in that example? And I know we didn't see too much of the parenting from Uncle Phil there. Okay, there we go. I do see a comment about that. So yeah, talk about Uncle Phil if you have any sense from this clip or also from the rest of the show if you've seen it.
Okay, so it's probably going to be easier for me to use my mic. Um, but as far as for Uncle Phil, I definitely think he was more on the authoritative side of parenting, where he was trying to be supportive of Will in that instance, in that time, because Will was struggling with that, and Uncle Phil was trying to help him through it, trying to like show that love, but still like let him know that it's okay, um, to basically have those feelings. But yeah, the biological dad was neglectful for all of Will's life.
Yeah, really good for the whole group. So everyone's agreeing for neglectful for the first example, and then authoritative for Uncle Phil. So really good there. So as a reminder, here though, we've got some neglectful parenting over here versus authoritative over here, and so hopefully these examples can help show you the differences. So we've talked about a bunch of examples in class, and people have shared their own examples. So hopefully you can see those. So go for it, Mackie.
I also feel like they're towards like in that scene, the biological dad was trying to be a little bit more in the permissive category, trying to be more buddy buddy with Phil or with Will. Ugh. But overall, he was still pretty neglectful.
Yeah, definitely. That even trying to be permissive and being kind of a friend to Will there, he's still not setting any kind of those demands, and he's not actually doing a really good job at showing warmth in that instance or throughout the show. Then we've got another comment also agreeing with authoritative for Phil, for Uncle Phil, throughout the whole show. So yeah, not everybody has probably seen that whole show, but yeah, through the whole show, there's maybe instances and situations where Uncle Phil is being really authoritarian, but overall very authoritative through the series of the entire show. So, right. Great job. Let's watch the next clip and discuss it. This one might not be as clear. We'll see.
I'm the princess. I'm the example. I've got duties, responsibilities, expectations. My whole life is planned out, preparing for the day I become, well, my mother. She's in charge of every single day of my life. Aye, Robin, jolly Robin, and thou shalt know of my project. And thou shalt know of mine.
Enunciate, you must be understood from anywhere in the room, or it's all for naught.
This is all for naught.
I heard that. From the top. A princess must be knowledgeable about her kingdom. She doesn't doodle. That's a C, dear. A princess does not be chortled. Doesn't stuff her gob. Rises early. Is compassionate. Patient. Cautious. Clean. And, above all, a princess strives for, well, perfection. But everyone...
All right, so take a minute and talk together about what kind of parenting style you saw from Merida's mom, the queen. I don't remember what her name is. But yeah, talk about that. All right. It looks like everyone is in agreement there on authoritarian. So as a reminder, we've got high demandingness, and I think that clip is essentially just showing that all the demands that are being placed on Merida there, but with zero back and forth. So, I mean, as you watch the movie, you definitely see that the parent does love their child, and I mean, one of the arcs, one of the story arcs for one of the characters through the movie, but again, not this clip, is that parent becoming more authoritative by the end of the movie. So yeah, really good job picking those things out there. So very low back and forth or discussion. She's the queen, so what she says goes. Literally, not just the queen of that family, but the queen of their country as well. So, all right, great job. So last one, and then we'll talk about the last one as well.
Wow, your house is really nice.
I know, right?
I'm home. Hey, Kylie.
Hey.
Hey, how are my best girlfriends? Hey, Mrs. George. This is Katie.
Hello, sweetheart. Hi. Welcome to our home. Just want you to know, if you need anything, don't be shy, okay? There are no rules in this house. I'm not like a regular mom. I'm a cool mom. Right, Regina?
Please stop talking.
Okay. I'm gonna make you girls a hump day treat.
This is your room? It was my parents' room, but I made them trade me.
You guys, happy hour is from 4 to 6.
Is there alcohol in this?
Oh, God, honey, no. What kind of mother do you think I am? Why, do you want a little bit? Because if you're going to drink, I'd rather you do it in the house.
No, thank you.
So, you guys, what is the 411? What has everybody been up to? What is the hot gossip? Tell me everything. What are you guys listening to? What's the cool jams?
Mom, could you go fix your hair?
Okay. You girls keep me young. Oh, I love you so much.
All right, this one might be the easiest one, honestly. I don't know. It's the neglectful example was pretty obvious as well, but go for it. Yeah, does anyone got permissive for all the votes? Does anybody think it showed any other examples of any kind of authoritarian, or uninvolved? This is probably one of the. It's really because it's played for comedy, so it's really over the top. So I could definitely imagine seeing parents like Phil or Will's biological dad, as well as Uncle Phil. But in this example, it's just so over the top permissive. Definitely possible to have a parent that permissive. Yeah. So with that being said, good job figuring those out. Hopefully these examples make it a lot more clear to you. You will have in your exam basically a situation, well, a couple situations presented to you, and then determine what kind of parenting style from the short situations. Again, it's just going to be one that you read rather than watch. But yeah, remembering these dimensions of being high or low on warmth and responsiveness and high or low on demandingness or control, those will help you figure out which one of these they are. So with that, how do you think these parenting styles are related to attachment styles? Or I guess another way to say that, let's take that first example of Will's biological father and neglectful parenting. What kind of attachment style might you expect from a parent who is neglectful? So what attachment style will that child have to that parent? Looks like Mackie, were you raising your hand as well? Okay, just trying to shield your screen from the sun. All right, so we've got some votes for avoidant and anxious avoidant. So yeah, definitely insecure attachment styles are going to be common with neglectful parents. So whether they are actually present in the child's life, if they're actually present, most likely it's going to be like an anxious avoidant or an insecure avoidant attachment style, because they know they can't necessarily rely on the support from that parent, even if the parent is present. In this example with Will's father, who's really not in the picture at all throughout his life, there might not actually even be an attachment style between Will and his biological father. And the Will seems to want that attachment, but it seems like there probably isn't actually an attachment that we would even qualify as insecure avoidant, that there's essentially just none there. So that's also a possibility with a neglectful parenting style. Which parenting style do you think is probably closest related or highest correlated with a secure attachment style? Maybe I said it too fast, or maybe the responses are still coming in. So thinking about a secure attachment style, which of those four parenting styles do you think would be most likely to lead to a secure attachment style? Yep, authoritative. Really good. So very good job. So when you have a parent who, again, is high on warmth as well as high on those demands and a structure, it is more likely that the child will be securely attached. Again, there's other variables that go into that as well. Just because you are an authoritative parent does not necessarily mean that your child will be securely attached, right? But if you are responding with warmth, if you have clear structure in the house, it's more likely. So that being said as well, you can have a parent with an authoritarian parenting style. So this style down here, you can have a parent with an authoritarian parenting style and have the child still be securely attached. It is definitely possible, as well as with the permissive parenting style. It's less likely, or it's less common on average, but it is still possible. And we talked about last time as well, parents can change their parenting style as well. So a parent who is an authoritarian parent, they can change to be more authoritative. Usually that doesn't happen just naturally. If they have a partner who's a different parenting style, they might move more towards that other style. Or if they take specific classes to build parenting skills, someone from another parenting style might be able to change to more authoritative. So really good. All right, so let's talk about punishment in the context of family and early childhood. So with punishment, physical and verbal punishment do not tend to be the best ways to help teach a child through problems or behaviors and things like that. So with this includes physical punishment might be something like spanking a child, and verbal punishment would be something like yelling at a child. So one thing that it does is it can model that kind of out of control behavior to children, because oftentimes a parent will yell or maybe spank because they are so stressed or anxious themselves or angry themselves that they'll take those behaviors. So punishments of that sort can often instill fear or rage and even avoidance of the parent by the child, especially in early childhood. So punishment is also not super constructive. Like, it doesn't necessarily help teach a child how they are supposed to act in that kind of situation. So something more like emotion coaching can do a better job at teaching how to act. And then parents can also, on occasion, become so angry and with, say, a physical punishment that they unintentionally become abusive. Or with a verbal punishment, they might end up being verbally abusive and emotionally abusive because they're so angry themselves. So it's definitely a high risk factor to avoid and try different techniques. So some punishments that are better or are maybe more recommended by psychologists, or one is taking a time out to calm down. So that allows a child, especially in early childhood, to have space, to maybe take some breaths, to play with toys or something for a minute, and also the parent some time to calm down. Let's say a child drew all over a wall or something, and it's a wall you just painted and you're really frustrated. Rather than yelling, it's probably better to have a timeout, have some time apart so that you can both calm down, and then being able to talk about things. So talk about the behavior, figure out alternative behaviors, let the child know what they did that was wrong, maybe even have consequences like, well, now that child needs to clean up the wall or something like that. Taking away privileges for a time might be relevant. So things like no Minecraft for 2 days, or no iPad or something like that. Or taking, let's say kids were fighting with swords and they were hitting each other. Taking away those swords might be an example of a better punishment, and then talking about that. So as an example of that one, I remember a time when I was probably about 7 and my brother was about 5. We had bows and arrows, like just practice tip arrows, but we were shooting them straight up into the air and we were catching the arrows on their way down. So definitely not the safest behavior. So the bow and arrows were taken away. I never saw them again in my entire life. So that was our punishment for that. Just a kind of a funny example here. Probably deserved, honestly. So with that, in relation to both teaching a child skills, co-parenting is a really important part of that. So we often talk about co-parenting in a sense of divorced parents, but co-parenting is also what parents who are together should be doing as well. So that's the cooperation and coordination with raising a child. So it can be especially difficult for someone in early childhood to be given 2 different messages or have 2 different standards or rules from 2 different parents. So if parents aren't co-parenting, having therapy can help them do better at working together, doing that cooperation. So it's really relevant not just for parents who are divorced, but also for parents who are together. So I actually moved these slides to the wrong place. So we're going to come back to these slides just on accident. So going from punishment, let's now talk about physical abuse. Like I mentioned, a lot of times abuse comes from excessive punishment. So it crosses that line from punishment into abuse. And so one of my least favorite topics to talk about, definitely a difficult subject to discuss, but definitely an important one to know and be aware of, as well as know some risk factors and protective factors for it as well. So physical abuse is defined as physical injury from punching, biting, burning, those kinds of things. In many of these cases, the parent might not be intending to hurt a child, but it might be coming from excessive physical punishment. Again, sad examples here in these situations. As an example, oftentimes when spanking a child that's wearing a diaper, even a young infant or baby, because there's a diaper there and a parent might be angry, that parent often will use more force because they know a diaper is there. This has led to children with like hips being dislocated and other things like that. So it's an example of that kind of punishment that was intended and maybe not intended to hurt the child, leading to abuse. So child neglect actually is one of the most common forms of child maltreatment. So we often talk about physical abuse. In the media, there's more talk about like physical and sexual abuse, but child neglect is actually more common than both of those. So child neglect is the failure to provide basic needs for the child. That includes physical, emotional, or educational needs for a child. So if we're talking about early childhood, we're talking about like preschool, kindergarten, first grade type of ages. So with this, the most common kind of treatment, or the most common mistreatment of children that we don't always talk about. So being aware of that, if it's something that you're aware of for like a family member or a friend or something like that, it's something to be aware of. So sexual abuse, fondling of genitals, intercourse, incest, rape, sodomy, exhibitionism, commercial exploitation of a child. So that would include pornography or even prostitution of children. So that is, again, physical and sexual, not as common. Emotional abuse is also very common, but not as often discussed as well. But again, the neglect is the most common. So emotional abuse are often unintentional as well, acts by parents or caregivers that cause or could cause serious behavioral, cognitive, or emotional problems. So again, we might have physical abuse that was intended as a punishment, but crosses that line. We might have yelling at a child cross over into emotional abuse as well. So it might not be that the parents are intending emotional harm on their children, but that is happening. So it's something that we should be aware of as we interact with children or work with children. If you go into psychology and you're working with young people or teaching or any kind of setting in your life, to be aware of these things. With that being said, the consequences or risk factors for abuse are that for children who have been mistreated, they are more likely to have poor or negative attachment styles. So that's not secure attachment. Basically, any kind of anxious, avoidant, insecure attachment styles are more common. Poor emotion regulation. So if you have a parent who is not modeling good emotion regulation and also abusive, it gives them not as many opportunities to see good emotion regulation, not as many opportunities to practice emotion regulation with a parent who is abusive. School problems are more common, as well as a higher likelihood of risk-taking behaviors, and then into adolescence, a higher probability of risky sexual behaviors as well. So, so we do have supports, though. One of, I think, the best facts and most positive in this difficult and sad topic is that 75% of abused parents who were abused when they were a child do not abuse their own children. So it's often talked about in the media that it's a cycle, that, oh, well, it's expected that they abuse their children because they were abused. Well, in reality, most children who are abused grow up and have children. So when they're parents, most of those people don't actually abuse their children. So 75% of people who are abused that grow up to be parents don't actually abuse their own children. And I think that's really positive. That definitely shows that even though it tends to be our default to fall back on the parenting that we experienced, it does show the plasticity of human development, that we don't always have to follow along with what we've learned or what we've experienced. So another big thing that's very helpful is also home visits for parents. So this seems to be the most helpful or have the biggest effect size early on when a child is born. So a new parent with a child, bringing it home, and we'll talk about this again as we talk about early adulthood and having children. It can be really helpful to have nurses or therapists come and do home visits to teach even basic skills like emotion regulation with a new human in the house. How do you get things like the dishes done at the same time you need to do things like feeding the baby and getting the baby to sleep and sleeping yourself? It can be a very stressful time, and this is sometimes when abuse might start. So stopping that early, giving new skills, emotion regulation strategies, home management strategies has shown to be really, really effective in reducing the probability of abuse of children. So It's a really good one. So psychotherapy can also help, so both as a family as well as individually. So for the person who's doing the abusing or for the child as well, therapy can be very helpful. Essentially, the earlier it's stopped and changed, the better outcomes for the child as well. So questions about that at all? I know it's a tough topic. Definitely not one of my favorite to cover, but if there are any questions, definitely a relevant time to ask. All right, so with that, this is also related to when we talked about with memory about how to ask questions of children who you think might be being abused. So here are those resources again. If you haven't, say, bookmarked them or saved them somewhere, probably a good thing to do. So in the case that you ever need to ask a child and you're worried that they might have been abused, having these resources to come back to could be helpful for you. But the big thing is asking open-ended questions rather than closed-ended questions. But we talked about this in more detail when we were talking about memory. All right, so let's jump, before we talk about siblings, let's talk about the slides that I accidentally put in the wrong spot. So parenting. So there is currently a lot of research in parents who are LGBTQ+, and there's a lot of funding available there. So, for example, I see from my graduate school, I see emails sent out to students saying, hey, this grant is available, or apply for this scholarship if this is the kind of research you're doing. Most of those are either cross-cultural studies, so applying a whole variety of things. In cross-cultural studies, and then the next most common that I see is things on LGBTQ+ issues. So for human development, for cognitive development. So if it's an area of interest to you, there's going to be a lot of research to look for question papers, as well if it's something that you might want to go into and research in the future. There's a lot of opportunities there. Versus my area of heroism, there's like 10 people doing that research, and I'm one of those 10, so less funding available for those topics, but there's still some. The biggest thing is here, so with this, about 20% of same-sex couples do have children. The majority of those children come from a previous relationship for those parents. And the big finding here is that there's essentially no difference in the child development of children from heterosexual parents as well as children from same-sex couples. So this includes things like no higher or lower instance of mental illness, no higher or lower popularity in, say, middle school and high school, no significant difference in school performance, like not getting significantly higher or significantly lower grades. Physical health is still at the same range of any child from heterosexual parents, and then no increased or decreased instances of LGBTQ+ identification. So having two fathers isn't going to make you more likely to also then seek out same-sex relationships. So we'll talk about this as we get into adolescence, sexual orientation development, but that's a couple chapters away. Basically, it's no more likely in these situations. So with this, there's a few differences in parenting comparing same-sex parents to heterosexual parents. They do tend to be more egalitarian in their shared responsibilities around the home and the family. So maybe both of them are working, or both of them are taking as many responsibilities with the child, or sharing more equally than most heterosexual couples with a man and a woman as the parents. So it tends to be more positive parenting, and with the children, they tend to have a fewer externalizing problems. So those are the things that we might observe as an outside observer. But yeah, not a very big effect size, or not a very big percentage difference. So yeah, if you want more resources about this, there's a good video here linked and a good paper here linked that might get you started. Yeah, there's a lot of research on this coming out now, and a lot of funding as well to doing this kind of research if it's something that you're interested in. So questions there in that area? We're going to hit some of these topics again in later times as well. Similar to most of what we cover in development, we kind of cover the same topics as people are aging up. One example of that is actually with siblings. We find a lot of these findings for siblings in early childhood are really relevant and mirror the findings of close friendships in adolescence and early and late adulthood. So essentially, some of the same findings you have for children with siblings at this age, you can kind of apply those same findings or similar findings to close friendships from adolescence all the way through the lifespan. But before we jump to that, let's take a quick break to let everyone be able to use the restroom and get a snack if you need. Let's be back at 10:53. So let's take a quick break and be back at 10:53.
man, crazy. The emo.
All right, and we are back. So hopefully all my settings are correct. Yep, it looks like they are. All right, let me know if you cannot hear me. If I look like I'm talking and you can't hear me, hopefully you email or put it in the chat. All right, so let's talk about sibling relationships. So about 80% of children do have a sibling. When thinking about early childhood, so think about kids, 2 or 4-year-old. If you have a sibling that's 2 and, well, 2 children, one that's 2 and 4, they will have a conflict about every 10 minutes on average. So these conflicts have a range, right? So about every 10 minutes, expect some kind of conflict. It might be they were playing toys together and one of the kids called the toy the wrong character name, and so they got yelled at or something like that. It could be something like that where they get over it really quickly and then go back to playing, or it can also range on the other hand to maybe they're actually physically fighting each other. But you can expect from kids at that age to have about conflict every 10 minutes, and then it kind of declines as they age. So if you've got an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, you should expect fewer conflicts than every 10 minutes, and then same as they grow older. So with this, as a parent or as a caregiver, as a professional working with kids, helping them initiate play, accepting when disappointment happens, like when someone doesn't want to play, or helping them coach through or doing emotion coaching parenting when they're angry or something is really helpful in these kinds of play settings. Like we talked about earlier, or last time, in doing one-on-one therapy with children, you might set up a situation where they get angry during a game, or where they experience disappointment because someone else doesn't want to play with them. But in day-to-day life, you should emotion coach through those kinds of just day-to-day experiences. You could plan and set up a scenario where they get upset or disappointed, but it's best just to coach through as they happen naturally and let them experience that. So siblings are a really good source for a back and forth interaction. So for that bidirectional development and interaction. So siblings share with each other. They can teach one another. They can compromise with one another. They can share emotional skills and abilities. They can support each other, communicate with each other. So a sibling relationship is one where you might be able to more clearly see that bidirectional interaction, the influence of one affecting child 2, and child 2's now affecting child 1, either in a positive upward spiral or maybe a negative downward spiral, and then they're fighting each other or something like that. So these kinds of utilities of sibling relationships also applies to friendships. Especially we can see from close friendships in, say, adolescence, early adulthood, middle adulthood, and basically all through, basically starting at around adolescence, you can have, we see close friendships that mirror the similarities of sibling relationships. So you might, for example, have a close friend that you would call your sibling, your brother or your sister or something like that. And in many ways, that relationship might be very similar to a sibling relationship. So with that being said, do parents with more than one child, do they favor one child over another? Let's have a quick vote in the chat. Don't scroll through on your own slides. But what do you think? Do parents have a favorite? Or do most parents have a favorite? Yes, no, maybe sometimes. Let's get some votes in the meeting chat. All right, so we've got a general agreement that yes, but maybe a couple nuances here too from some of these comments are really good. maybe the oldest or youngest. Some cases they might have a favorite, or sometimes they might have a favorite. Very good. So yeah, on average, most parents, most mothers and fathers do have a favorite. So 65% of mothers. This one thing this goes to is they might say they don't, but they might in some cases. This definitely goes to research methods. So if you ask a parent in front of their children, hey, do you have a favorite child, when those children are sitting there, you're probably not going to necessarily get an honest answer. But if you ask in a study where it's completely anonymous, where the children will never know, where you're not making the parent like feel any kind of guilt for having a favorite, when you do that kind of research, you might get more honest responses. So from those kinds of research, we do find that about 65% of mothers do say that they have a favorite, and about 75% of fathers also say that they have a favorite. But it does have a little more intricacies than that, right? So in some cases, maybe there's a favorite that they like to go out on hikes with, but there's another favorite that they might want to go to the movies with or something like that. So it can also be context dependent. Most of the research I've seen is just the overall, do you have a favorite or do you not? And then looking at like self-esteem and other predictors for that child. But that could be an interesting question paper if you want to look at the different times when a parent's favorite might shift. I bet you could find that research, but I haven't actually read it. So that idea that in some cases or sometimes, or is it more common for an oldest or a youngest to be the favorite? I think that would be a good thing to look into for a question paper if that was something you're interested in. So with that being said, for the non-favorite, it is correlated to lower self-esteem and sadness. It also tends to cause conflict between siblings. I think this picture kind of gets at that. Let's say this is Sarah. So Sarah, you're my favorite, so you get the first slice. These two children, let's call them green child and yellow child, just because they have green and yellow on them. So green and yellow will probably be able to start picking that up. Even in early childhood, that Sarah gets, well, one, Sarah's got a name versus a color. They'll start to pick up that Sarah is getting more things than them, has maybe slightly different rules, is attended to more quickly. And so that often leads to lower self-esteem for green and yellow child, as well as conflict. So maybe these two will team up to kind of overpower this hierarchy to be higher on that rung. Maybe green child will try to be higher on the hierarchy than yellow child, even if they know they can't be higher on that hierarchy than Sarah. So it can cause some problems. So with that being said, for parents or other caregivers, trying to make sure that you're not being obviously favoritive is really important. Still giving warmth and support and similar kinds of directions to children is really good. With that being said, my children are 4 years apart, so developmentally they need different things. So I'm expecting more from the older child because they're capable of doing more things on their own. So sometimes I get a response of, that's not fair. Why doesn't Malcolm have to do that? Well, it's because Malcolm's 4 years younger and in many cases literally not capable of doing what we're asking you to do. Let's say they're both cleaning their rooms. Maybe I will help Malcolm, but not help the older child. As an example. So is that unfair? Well, in a way, yes, but it's also developmentally what they need. So there is some of that needs to go on, but focusing on, are you treating a child with favoritism is something to be aware of and focus on. Interestingly, the oldest child is my favorite and the youngest child is my wife's favorite. So hopefully we're canceling out some of those negative effects for both of our children. All right, so with this, again, these are some findings about the emotional and intimacy and the variation among sibling relationships that also later on you'll see apply to friendships or can apply to really close friendships. So children's sibling relationships have a lot of emotion quality. They can have a chance to express more intense emotions, and they often do. So children will often express more intense emotions to each other than they will to either their parents or other family members or caregivers or peers. So it gives them an opportunity to do that and share those things, both positive and negative. So the most angry I've ever seen my children are probably times they've been angry at each other. Also, the most happy that I've ever seen them are probably times when they're playing together or doing something together. So with that, most siblings do have mixed feelings overall about their siblings. So they might have a generally positive sense of sibling number one, or Sarah, or the green sibling. But they also might have mixed feelings. So I have a generally positive sense of Sarah from that previous picture. But it does frustrate me that she's a favorite and she gets all these things. So oftentimes siblings will have mixed feelings, and that's perfectly normal, and that's fine, as long as they're still getting these good quality of familiarity, intimacy, emotional quality. As long as those things are high, it's fine to have these mixed feelings about siblings, even into and throughout adulthood as well. So with that, when we're talking about intimacy in the psychology setting, usually the definition of intimacy that we're using is the sharing of personal information about yourself, or like things that are important to you, things that are meaningful, things that are relevant. That's what usually psychologists are referring to when we say intimacy. So familiarity and intimacy means that the kids are sharing things with each other. So my kids both know their favorite things that each other likes, their favorite shows or their favorite toys at my children's age. In adolescence, they probably know before the parents the crushes that the other sibling has, things like that. So siblings usually know each other pretty well, which one can lead to a lot of emotional as well as physical support for their sibling. But it can also lead to more teasing of their sibling. So if my daughter knows that my son's favorite toy is his magic wand, then to tease him, it's really easy. Take the magic wand. That's an easy target, for example. So it can be really positive. It can also be negative in some ways too. But that's what we're talking about, familiarity and intimacy, that they know each other really well. So there's also a lot of variation in sibling relationships. So you'll see this with especially large families, that there might be preferences between siblings. So maybe it looks like these two siblings here in this picture are probably twins. So they might prefer their twin over the sibling that's not a twin. They're probably shared age. They look like it looks like their sibling is probably younger. So maybe they prefer each other to their younger sibling. And the bigger family you'll also see this. Maybe there's a couple siblings that are kind of their own clique, versus all the siblings kind of being on a level playing field of liking between each other. So with that, some siblings might be described as really positive or in affectionate ways. Some siblings might be seen as very irritating or mean. For example, maybe this child, I'm going to say this child's name is Butterfly, although those might be Bows. But let's say Bo or Butterfly might have a preference for this sibling, might describe them as in really positive ways. Like, I really like my sister. They're really cool. We like to play a lot. I don't really like my younger sibling. They're annoying. They're always wearing orange and it's my least favorite color. I don't know, something like that. So silly examples, I know, but hopefully it helps you think about people in your own life, whether it's friends or siblings or say cousins or something like that, where you might have seen these dynamics happening. So if there's any kind of examples like that that you're thinking of as I'm describing these phenomenon that we see, maybe write those down in your notes, because that'll definitely be a lot more relevant than if you're reading your notes and you say, well, who is the butterfly child or who is the green child? That it'll be more relevant to have your own examples that you think of and can connect. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about birth order. So birth order has essentially no effect. So there's very, very small effects from birth order. It's very poor predictor. So if we're trying to do, so if we're trying to do a regression and use lots of different correlations between things to predict future behavior, we can put in multiple variables. Birth order is not a really great predictor. You could put it in to predict, but it's not going to be too big of a help. So, for example, firstborns have slightly higher IQ on average. But what that means is this effect is really small. So in a study of, let's say, 1,000 different people with siblings of different levels, they will find that the firstborn tends to have a couple higher IQ points than another, or than the secondborn. So that would be, let's say 100 is a pretty average IQ score. So the firstborn might have like 102 or 103 IQ. And just to give you a sense of how much IQ changes over time, generally 1 year of college, we generally see a jump in IQ points of like 3 to 5 with 1 year of college. So that kind of gives you a sense of how little difference there are there for IQ. IQ has measurement problems anyway, though, so we won't get into that. But later born children tend to be a little more agreeable. Only children tend to be more achievement oriented. But a lot of the generalizations, you might hear that firstborn children are always this way and lastborn children are always this way. Those are all really big oversimplifications. There are a lot of contexts that affect development beyond just the order you were born in. If you had authoritative parents versus authoritarian parents versus permissive, that's going to be a bigger variable. Your own temperament is going to be a bigger variable and effect on your development than your birth order. So it is a variable that we can see some correlations with some things like IQ or agreeableness, but it's not a huge predictor. So if you've always felt like, well, I'm the firstborn, so I've got this and this thing that are the best, go ahead and take a look for a question paper, find some good research on birth order. It might agree with you or it might not, and then you can write me a paper, and if you can show me a couple good examples of some big effect sizes, then that would be fun to change the slide based on newer, better research for sure. So any questions about that? It's one thing my sister, who for a while was the youngest, and then I had a younger sister after that, she was really concerned with birth order and would talk to us a lot about, like, I'm this place in the family, so that means this. So, all right, so let's talk about things that parents can do to support siblings. Let's watch this little video. It's got a couple different ideas. It's relevant to like the emotion coaching that we've talked about, and we've talked about a lot of these ideas, but hopefully some of these examples here are really concrete and help.
Raising kids is tricky business and becomes more trickier when you have more than one in the room. So what are some things you can do as a carer or a parent to help your child get on with their sibling and to manage some of those tricky situations? Well, number one, be a really good role model for your child. Children need parents who, demonstrate the skills that they want their child to demonstrate. The other thing is, you don't shut the stable door once the horse has bolted. So you've got to teach your child over a period of time how to deal with difficult situations with their siblings, like not sharing or not getting on in a situation where they want to watch a particular show. What you can do is coach your child through that. Give them real life examples and practical examples on how to deal with those situations. See, with all best planning, things still don't go the way we want as parents. So it's always really important to remain calm as a parent. Have realistic expectations of your child, because children are going to learn the first time you tell them. What you can do is sit gently by your child, not be too authoritative, not be an authoritarian figure, but be a kind figure. Help them work through it. When a child's melting down because they're not getting on with their sibling, feel their pain. Understand that no child wants to live life on the edge, but they actually do want friends, but they slip from time to time. The other thing you can do is take care of yourself as a parent. I think often you have very high expectations of yourself, but also of your child. These children have been around for a couple of years, so they're going to naturally slip up. And this doesn't mean you're not good at parenting. It just means we're all practicing. As children are practicing how to get on, you're practicing how to be a parent. The other thing I'd tell parents is just enjoy the ride. Parenting is not always going to be smooth sailing, but when it does go well, it goes really well. So, enjoy the ride with your child, and hopefully as time progresses, they know how to deal with conflict.
So hopefully that video, especially in the context of emotion regulation that we've talked about and emotion coaching, helps give some concrete examples and tying it together for how to help with siblings and help them learn as they're doing things with each other and maybe in conflict. All right, so we've got a couple minutes left. I think we can get through some of the information on family systems, maybe even all of it. I'm just wondering if we'll make it all the way through chapter 6, but I think we'll be pretty close. So with that being said, this number may have changed as of now. It might be a little higher, but over 50% of U.S. mothers with children under 5 are in the workforce. So you think about age 5 is around preschool and kindergarten time, so going into school the first time. So 50% of mothers with children under that, where we might generally expect that they need an immediate caregiver all the time, 50% of mothers with children are in the workforce. So 2/3 of mothers with children from 6 to 17 are in the workforce as well. So children, especially girls, have more egalitarian views of gender when the mother works outside the home. So when there is more of those shared egalitarian responsibilities of both parents working, girls do tend to have more, well, all children have more egalitarian views of gender. So with that, working parents can be a positive or a negative force on children. So if you think of that, we just had it up here, too far back, darn it. If you think of Lerner's bioecological systems theory and the models that we've shown, so the circles that are bidirectional interacting, so that workforce, that parents working, can be a positive or a negative impact on children. So if parents are coming home and they're really stressed or they're in poor work conditions, it can lead to less engagement with children. If their job's really hard, it's many long hours, maybe the parent comes home and they just can't interact with the children. That could be a negative thing on the children. But if the job has better working conditions, the parent is happy with what they're doing, that job can be a positive force on the children because the children can still have a lot of positive interactions with that caregiver. So working parents aren't like overall net positive or net negative. It's really context dependent on the other aspects surrounding that family situation. So do the children have the resources they need? Do they have the care? Do they have the warmth and responsiveness that they need? Do they have the structure that they need? Are the parents overstressed, or the parents able to have the time and energy to work and play with kids? So it's all really dependent on other contexts, not just the work being a variable that's predictive of positives or negatives. So with that being said, another aspect of family systems is divorce. So 40% of children born to married parents will experience their parents' divorce. So pretty much in line with the percentages of divorces. So children of divorced families do show a poorer adjustment in many areas. And the more divorces they go through, the worse those adjustments are. So if they've been through one divorce versus a friend went through 2 versus another friend went through 3, the more divorces tends to build up as a risk factor. So these include things like academic problems, externalizing problems, depression, less competence in intimate relationships. And you can see how that might be a bidirectional effect, right? Maybe their parent, let's say their parent's been divorced twice. Maybe the parent themselves is less competent in relationships, and so they're not learning the skills to do well in relationships at the same time. So it could be that effect. So with that being said, something that's talked about amongst people is, should parents stay together for the sake of the children? And research has looked at this, has asked this question. So depending on the study, you might look at a bunch of different variables or only a few variables, but the general consensus is if the stress and disruptions caused by the unhappy marriage are diminishing the well-being of the children, then possibly splitting might be the best option. But if there's stress and disruptions that aren't really negatively impacting the children, then it might still be beneficial to stay together for the children. So if there's abuse in that kind of situation, then highly likely you should be getting a divorce in that kind of situation. So again, it's very context dependent. So if the parents can't stand each other and are fighting in front of the children all the time, causing a really unsafe place at home, that might be a reason to get a divorce, for example. Or if the parents are still able to co-parent, even if they're not actually together, like under the same roof, and not actually divorced, that they might be able to keep the well-being of the children up and help the children be thriving together. So again, it's really context dependent, but those are some of the main things that researchers have looked at are the disruptions caused to the children's well-being, essentially. So one thing with divorce often leads to diminished financial resources. So if you've got two parents working and now you're exclusively living with, say, one parent, and you have just that one parent's financial resources, depending on how everything turns out with custody and child support and things like that. With that, also increased risk of divorce for those children down the line. If you have diminished financial resources, one of the parents is inept, maybe the parent that's getting the child is an inept parent, and there's continued conflict even after divorce, then it may be better in that kind of situation to stay together for the sake of the children. So there's not one like overarching, yes, you should always stay together, or no, you should definitely not stay together. Looking at the research, and there's actually quite a lot of research on this. So reading a lot of papers, talking to therapists as well is probably a good idea before a divorce as well as through a divorce too, to help support children in that kind of situation. So even if maybe the therapy, you can build skills and the divorce doesn't happen, or if the divorce does happen, that therapy can help build skills so that you can co-parent better and lead to more higher well-being for those children. So either way. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a better sense of that question, the answer to that. So most problems coming from a divorce do seem to come from the initial stages of active conflict. So when there's first the conflict between the parents, most of the problems the child seems to have can be traced to those initial conflicts, because they're usually more extreme there at the beginning versus when they kind of decide, hey, we are going to split up, going through the process. Usually it's from the initial, like, more active conflict part of the divorce. So this risks the attachment of the child to their parents. So they might have had a secure attachment, but now they no longer feel that secure attachment anymore. So they feel that there's not safety and security. So more resources or tips for parents to support kids. This video is a good one. Again, therapy for the parents and through the divorce is also very, very helpful. So after divorce, one of the biggest things is co-parenting and trying to have a harmonious environment. It might still be challenging for those two parents to work together, but trying to have as harmonious of a co-parenting relationship as you can to support those children and those children's needs is the best outcome for those children. So we'll go into this again and finish it up next time in class. But that is all the time we have for today. So any questions about these things that we haven't been able to discuss yet, feel free to email me, or we can talk about it next time. And hope you have a good day. Enjoy the snow as well this weekend, and stay safe.